Okay, let's look at that fixed end frame that we call problem 4, I guess. You'll see it when I bring it in. Of course, sometimes you can't get those pictures off of Google Docs drawings, so you just learn to do a print screen. So I've done that. I'm going to go and remember that you bring in a picture by doing XREF, my XREF, and then you image XREF typically. I'm going to go out to my pictures if I even know where they are. Mark Attack, Pictures, and I think I called that fixed end. Remember, you bring this in, and of course you can cut and paste. You all know that, of course. I'm going to bring that in, and what the important thing again is that you understand that when something comes on the AutoCAD plane, you immediately get it to the right scale. And so I'm going to do that, of course, by using that great found command, I'm going to call it, because I didn't know it existed. Make this 20 feet tall. If that in fact is what that is, I do an align command. Grab the object here, grab my first source point. It's hard to see what I'm doing there, but I'm going to grab my first source point there, turning off my ortho, shift right click, the endpoint for my first destination point. Second source point, which you can't really see, I'm going to put that up at the top, and I'm going to put that now to the endpoint there as my destination point. Third, none there, and I am going to both scale and align, and now I've got this thing, everything to scale. Now I'm making the assumption that that was 20 feet tall, and then the forces are to scale as well. Zoom E. Let's once again see how you can, of course, remember how we can do R cross F on this one. I guess I'll do it that way. So we've got to what? We've got to move everything, if we're smart, everything from, so our basic base point there is at right there. Second point is 0, 0, 0. Zoom E. Now, of course, we can draft on top of things. I'll put the forces on the layer object. So I set layer here, turn that on, which in the past I had a box around it for plotting, and now I can do align. And right now you start to see how that transparency gets you. So what you might want to do is learn the image adjust or some other like thing that lets you take this and then fade it out a little bit, not just to send it to back, but to fade it out so it's not so high on your eye. And now when you do align, kind of zooming in within there. Remember, we can do all this by raster to vector as well. So the concept of, you got one line there, line from, in all essence, the way I drafted wasn't so good, to there, and 3 there. Remember, if we had this all set up correctly now, as we go here, if we have the quick properties on, over the top of that, we have our quick properties start XY, delta, start XY, delta, start XY, delta. We take the sum of those moments, and those moments have to be resisted by this internal moment. Those forces have to be resisted by this internal moment. So I'm going to pause this, bring it up, show you the mathematics, sketch it back in, and see how that compares to what we did while we slided vectors inside of PowerPoint. Again, all these different methods, I'm going to tell you, as a rule, AutoCAD probably should be your preferred. SketchUp if you want to build it, because you can actually get SketchUp a lot cheaper. So I'm going to pause this, bring up, and show you what the matrices look like for the determinant. What we're going to see then is there's going to be a reaction up and away here, and also a torque, depending on how these things are torquing. These are probably torquing it more than that because of this moment arm. These moment arms are pretty close here. Even though this force is smaller, it's got more torque. So you're going to see this thing is going to tend to bend, so it's concave to the right. So I'm going to hit pause here, bring up PowerPoint, and show you those matrices. Okay, here's in fact what the matrices look like for the R cross F. So this is your 0, 0. The first one, you think about it, it's minus 7.68 and 20.14, and more or less. This is really 20, but we'll live with that. this is really 20 here, and I'm going to just, so that doesn't get so confusing the way I draft it, I'm going to make sure that those are 20. That was my drafting there. Sometimes you got to step back and look at the numbers, and this is 20. You come back to your drafting there, and then this is BB20 as well. They're all at an even elevation along that top. So file, exit, and return. So you have your more or less your matrices that look like this. What you have to realize that these two reactions have no ability to do a moment about A, so the reactive moment in A is the opposite of these. And the reactive moment in the reactive force in the X at A, it has to be the opposite of the forces in the X, and the reactive moment at Y in the A has to be the opposite of the forces at Y. I'll sketch that in and put the math here in a second. Alright, I've brought up a calculator, and I've brought up some lists to show you, hopefully, that these matrices, with the radial vector and the force vectors, can be calculated pretty easily in a spreadsheet or a calculator. That's why you have these tools. And so once you've got them put in there, depending on what you've got written, you can calculate the moments. So what I've done is I just put these three in. We'll calculate the moments, and we will then know, in the sum of the forces, we'll know the opposite will be our reactions, because we have an A in the X, a reaction at A in the Y, and a reactive moment. So whatever the moments are will be what the opposite of what this sums will be what your reactions are. So if we go second quit here at this point, and we do program, and this was again the VList, AA VList, VList 2, and VList 3, enter this here. All that's doing is adding some matrices. So we have a moment arm of 4.19 and magnitude of the force of 30.59. Second program, getting a clear here. We'll see how that works. You got to hit an enter because it's got a pause in it. It's giving me something about the magnitude of the force of the moment arm and the direction, but really what you can go to is back to the program here, to VList 3, and it should give you the sum of the forces in the X are 9.17, the forces in the Y are that, and the sum of the moments are 128. So your reactive moment, if you think about the moment here, it's showing your reactive moment of negative, so your reactive moment here over here is 128.28. So I'm going to go over here and put that in. Again, we're the opposite, 128. I'm going to put it as, I'll just call this foot-pounds for now. And then your reaction in the A and the X are going to be the opposite. Your reaction in the X is a minus 9.17. And your reaction in the Y is a plus 29.19. And now why go about doing these things? Why go about doing the process? Well, remember, what's behind this is not important. So if I'm interested, for instance, in the calculation mid up the thing here, in other words 10 foot here, what I've got to do is I've got to change each of my radial vectors and think about what's behind us. Now what happened is I didn't save what I did here, so I'm going to put that back here. File, exit, and return. So when I go up the structure, what's behind us is not important. So the only things I've got to worry about is this and this. Remember that moment. You do not have to translate it through space. It's just 128. So you're going to have a negative 128 moment less whatever is here. And in this case, you haven't changed your X, but you've changed your Y. So if we think about this concept in terms of the review, start inking, that what's behind us as we climb the pole is not important. You do not see that. You do not see that. You do not see that unless you're looking up. This, of course, is now your radial vector is now a minus 10. And so if you add up these two, what's interior, in other words, if I'm right here in the middle at 10 foot up, this calculation, what's behind us is not important. Will get us the internal moment and the internal forces right here in that beam. And you have to realize, of course, that the shear is going to be the same and the axial force is going to be the same, because these things you haven't passed any forces. However, the torque will differ. In other words, the torque at some point, this will kind of flip back the other way potentially. So if you're looking at what is this torque is about 91 negative. So this is going to be negative 91, so the internal torque is going to be around a negative 30, right? Because it's going to be the opposite. If you add the 128, which is a positive torque, for the reaction, it's a positive torque, so the internal torque is the opposite of that. You come up with that mathematics. All right, that's how you do that, and how and why you build those matrices, and then walk around the structure saying what's behind this is not important. Thanks for listening.